systemic change where every road is leading to the same place. And there is power in that. When we get through the confusion and we get through the complexity, I think there is really going to be some synergy that's been garnered by focusing on the same 4 components in all of our work. So bear with me. My plan today was this morning I would just share with you 3 brief slides, just enough to pique your interest in school improvement, knowing that for many of you, if you don't have schools in steps 3, 4, 5, or districts in improvement, you don't really think that much about school improvement being something of interest to you. What you know now, I think, is that while I wanted to step into this sort of in a sensitive, careful way, David didn't necessarily think that was necessary. And so he sort of let you know that what's happening in district and school improvement is going to happen everywhere. It is the metrics that are going to be used in Race to the Top, in SFSF, and probably in the reauthorization. So while I was going to be careful, I really liked his bullet point. Changes are so extensive that it's hard not to think of them as a draft revision of ESEA's unsuccessful sections. So with that, I'd like to direct your attention to the timelines. I'm going to try not to be redundant to some of the information that's been presented by Zali and by David, but the timelines are important. Many of you keep hearing the terms guidance, and you may or may not be familiar with that, but guidance is basically the first information that comes out to an agency, in this case a state education agency, that provides you what the proposed regulations are. And then there's a period for submitting comments that allow public input. And then there's issued non-regulatory guidance, which clarifies or perhaps changes slightly. I was really disappointed to hear Zali talk about how many people filed comments with school improvement. 147 comments from across the nation, and it's going to change the face of what we do. Now, I recognize that most people weren't aware of that, but we're going to have to hope that some of the comments that were issued were strong, and that some of the similar sentiments were echoed in people who did provide comments to Race to the Top. But because they're so interrelated and linked, that they'll be similar. I wanted to provide you that baseline of information because if you go in and read the guidance that was provided, it sounds very definitive, as this is absolutely what's going to happen, and yet it's still subject to the 30-day comment period. And in school improvement, as you saw, we're the only division within the agency that will need to apply for the money. So our applications are our opportunity to customize that to the context of the state of Washington. So when that final guidelines come out and an application packet comes out, we'll try our best to make this fit the regulations and fit the kind of work that many of you have been engaged in the state of Washington. That's further complicated by that last bullet, that there's been some confusion about the use and delivery of funds. And some people from our Title I office and from my office had an opportunity for an hour-long conference with Dr. Stevenson on Friday. And it's really about 2 issues. One issue is when are the 103G monies going to come, and the ARRA monies are going to come. Because we as a division took that message that said this is an unprecedented opportunity, there is a sense of urgency, you've got to start planning now, and we did that. We've contracted with 110 people, we've invited districts, we're serving districts, we have partners we've contracted with, only to learn on September 3rd that our money is not going to come potentially till February, but it could be not until July 2010. That's the first issue with money. The second issue is that there is a strong possibility that those 103G monies are being repurposed and will need to be used based on the new metrics. So you can imagine our trepidation when we heard that there would be no money arriving for quite some time, and that when it arrives, we may not be able to use it on many of the current plans that we have. If you come to the school and district improvement presentation, we'll provide a little bit more information on that one. So you've heard a little bit about this before, the key components that are in the school improvement grant proposed regulations. The first one that you didn't hear a little about and that David didn't share the specifics are what those new metrics are. So how are we going to identify that lowest 5% where we're going to implement one of those required models? You heard a little bit about how we're going to identify different tiers of schools, and that for the first time, Title I eligible secondary schools may be eligible for services. You've heard about some of that new funding and accountability, and you'll hear about more of that in both our session and in other session. And then about new district responsibilities, which is basically being able to provide support to your schools that fall in Tier 1 or Tier 2. Want to spend just a minute to talking about some of the potential implications to our current programming. One is the likelihood of that repurposing of funding. We are anticipating that at the minimum it will require a $6 million reduction immediately, and that there is the potential, based on the further guidance on the use of those G funds, may require us to reduce some others. So we'll speak a little bit more about that. There are no final decisions that have been made, but they will be shortcoming to superintendents within the next couple of weeks. We wanted to also make a point of you understanding that there are current similar requirements for all of the ARA money that's going out, as well as the Title I set-aside that we use and the 1003G money. So our ability to separate those, each of those used to come with their own rules and regulations. They're now blending those together. And to understand the immediate shortfall that we're going to be facing. I'd like to invite you to come to our sessions. Our intents are to share with you what we know and what we don't know, and to be as transparent as we can on understanding the current situation. And then once again, I would remind you that there are components of these guidelines that many of you will say, this is what we've been asking for a long time. It is going to be in the transition from one system to another without a lot of time and without a lot of forward warning that that was going to happen. That's going to create the challenges for us. But I do believe that we're going to come out the other side of this with a stronger program that will really more effectively represent what reasonable people think low performance looks like. Thank you.
Sure. You're going to introduce me? Oh, Lord.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No. This is Jolyn Berge, the messenger, okay?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to ask my staff to stand up, but we're already all standing here. I do have one partner that's here, though, that I work with a lot, Cal Brody. Can you stand up? So Cal and I do stabilization. Really, it's not like he wanted to, he has to. Cal and I do stabilization together, and typically what happens, and I know this happens a lot in the districts, we meet about 5:30, 6 o'clock at night on Fridays. We go up to a whiteboard and we say, okay, we have some guidance that we must get out to the districts tomorrow. Let us sketch it out. And so far, we've been able to agree on the end and continue with the ride. So it has been kind of a wild ride. There's been a lot of changes. I appreciate all the work that your fiscal staff has gone through to, there's been just a lot of changes, and we keep changing the target. As we learn new things, it means more work for you in the districts, and we appreciate your being our partner with that. I want to encourage you to use Bob's templates that he put up here. If you have not sat down and scheduled out a 4-year spending plan, please do so. And who you need around that table is you really need the soup, you need the fiscal staff, and you need the program staff to make sure you're all on the same page about when you think you're going to use the money. And a lot of that can be impacted by how much money you're carrying over. So there are some big things that you need to keep your eye on. When are the funds over and dead for you? When is your the end date for using them? And what are some of the other impacts on maintenance of effort and some of the things that Doug and Gail talked about? So that's really important. Stabilization, SFSF, which we call stabilization. Part 2 of the application